Then I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Any objections or seconds? Make it a second.
I will second Kaylee Henson.
Okay, all right. And no objections, then the minutes are approved from last meeting. So I think then we're moving on to our PREA policy update. And I believe we have guests here to talk about that.
Can I just want to make sure that it's official because everybody, or when people are virtual, it has to be a roll call vote, even for things like approving the minutes.
We should just not approve the minutes. I'm just kidding. All right, let's take a, yeah, thank you, Crystal.
I just want to make sure everything's on the up and up.
You know, that's perfect. Okay, so, let's
if
do
you want, I can do
a roll call for approval of the minutes.
That works. Okay, Madeline Adams.
Aye.
Angela Brewer.
Aye.
Nikki Engel.
Aye.
Kyla Marie Granda.
Kyla Marie Granda, aye.
Thank you. Nazra Hassan.
Aye.
Kylie Henson.
Kaylee Henson. Aye.
Thank you.
No problem.
Vicki Hunter.
Yes.
Angelisa Mays Andrews.
Here.
Paula, did you get on? See her? Jeff Spees.
Aye.
Angela Thompson.
Aye.
Corey Thompson.
Aye.
And I apologize, Laura Bizzato. Okay, and that is a unanimous vote.
Perfect. Question, if we were to do a roll call or a vote in the future, Crystal, do you know, must we do it audibly or could we do it in the chat by everyone putting their answer in the chat?
I was just looking at the data practices page from the Department of Administration, and it says all votes are conducted by roll call, so each member's vote can be identified and recorded, which certainly would imply to me that that would be okay.
I would agree. So maybe what we could do is if we have any more voting to do this meeting, we'll just try the chat method. And then next month, we'll try the chat method too, and we'll just keep playing around with this to see, you know, what works best. Okay, well, we've got pre-policy update. We have two guests with us, and
then we've got Liz and Gino online.
Liz and Gino are online. So I guess in terms of the order, we were, I think, talking, the last thing that we had done as a task force related to PREA was, I believe we were looking at some of the PREA in the context of some of the juvenile facilities. And that was the conversation that I believe we had with Gino and with, I'm looking for the name again to remember who that was.
Liz and Gino were here.
Liz, okay.
Yes.
So and then prior to that, we had a conversation with the other PREA folks that are present, and forgive me. Christy Strang and Mike Garland. So I guess I'm going to leave it to the folks that are here to talk about PREA. What do you think makes sense in terms of the order in which you guys kind of tell us the updates?
It might make some sense. I think the things that Gino and I can address would be specifically the PREA policy, which the task force did provide comment to. And then I believe there was a question about some of the new federal stuff around transgendered individuals and its impact with PREA. I think those are the two things that we can directly address if we want to start there. And then, I would turn it over to Christy to talk about licensing stuff. Does that make sense?
So then Liz and Gino, let's start with the two of you from your team. And then my recollection is that we had a subcommittee that prepared some proposed policy language for all of you while you were working on your policies. And I don't think we have heard back whether you incorporated that or not, or how that all played out.
Right.
So why don't you guys start there?
Right. And I'm hoping that perhaps it was just yesterday that folks were provided a copy of the final draft of the PREA policy. Don, did that go out to folks?
I did not get that out, but I can share it now.
Yeah. So we did take and looked at the input from the task force. It also went through our various loops internally, and we have presented it to the executive council. I'm not sure if it makes sense for us to spend the time to kind of go through the entire draft. It's fairly lengthy policy, but let me give some general comments and we'll talk about what input we took from the task force and where we didn't input, kind of explain why not or what happened with that input. Would that be helpful?
Yes.
So, actually, Don, I'm going to ask you to take down the policy. I don't think the language itself, I don't think people are going to be able to absorb it quick enough in the meeting. But if we could get that attached to the minute so everybody can see it and be able to reflect on it. So the first thing I would say is this, is that one of the things that we were trying to do with this updated policy was one of the things that we did is that we made sure that it was in full alignment with the national PREA standards. And and our reasoning for doing this was a couple, is that we want to make sure that all of our facilities are meeting those baseline criteria. And we want to make sure we have uniformity across all of our facilities. The second thing is this, is that we, each of our facilities is audited every 3 years. And they're audited against the federal standards, but they're also audited against the state, our own policies. So I know there was a commentary placed someplace that we could do more, go beyond what the federal PREA standards are. And there were some places in the standards where we did that. But we were also finding that also meant that all of our facilities were being audited against that standard, even if it was greater or went beyond the federal PREA standards. And so we were failing audits and failing audits on some of those pieces. So our position right now is let's go back, draw the policy back to the federal PREA standards. Let's get full and consistent compliance with those standards. And then we're then looking at building in. Every year, the policy gets reviewed. And we will continue then to look at, okay, we are now consistently meeting our PREA standards through audits. Where does it make sense for us to expand and become more aspirational, I would say, in our policies? So that's our position.
Follow-up questions about that. You're
Yeah.
saying, when were these audits taking place? Were they?
We had 6 audits in the last year.
So within the last year, was it? Was it prior
we have
to
a
when we had the conversation about the policy, or was it after that?
We have rolling audits all the time. We have within each 3-year cycle, all 11 facilities are audited, and that also includes, Red Wing, both juvenile and adult, right? So they're on a 3-year cycle, and each year. So we just completed Stillwater's audit a week ago. We're in the midst of Rush Cities right now. We have Faribault and Oak Park Heights prepping for their audits. The field work will happen, right? So there's a constant audit cycle happening. But every 3 years, all facilities must be audited. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is when you did the new policy recommendations that we've had haven't been implemented. So I'm assuming the audits were based off of the prior policies that you had in place.
Yes.
Were
Yep.
federally,
Yes.
which were federally compliant as a floor, but did they also have enhanced protections in them or not?
They had, well, you could call them advanced protections, or you could say they could have other obligations
Yeah.
that were built into those policies, right? So that the policies create, and here's the other thing, is the policies also brought a number of what I would call practices and implementation steps were included in the previous policy, right? So yes, so like the audit year, yeah, so all of the audits that have been completed were all based on the previous published policy.
Right. Okay.
So the draft that you saw was not even the previous policies. The draft already included updating that had been happening in the revision time period. Does that make sense?
So, yes. So I guess, again, I'm just trying to think, I'm trying to make sure that I understand the standard that was used when auditing the facilities that were found to be not in compliance. So, I mean, if I'm just reading through the lines here and trying to oversimplify perhaps, it seems that the facilities are not up to just the basic federal standards, and you want to make sure that that's happening first before adding other standards. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And so does that include Shakopee?
Yes. Includes all facilities. Yep.
When was Shakopee last audited?
It would have been, they reached their compliance last November. So November of 24.
And that was just with the basic federal compliance in November
Yep.
of 2024.
Yep.
Okay, give me a minute to write this down. Okay. And so what you're saying then is it doesn't make sense to add additional, I would call them safeguards for the people who are incarcerated until we can meet the floor that is set by the feds.
I could give
generally,
an example too, Liz.
Yeah, go ahead and give an example, Gino.
So,
Or do you
for
want-
example, in our past policy, we had like retaliation monitoring or like follow-ups, and we had specific days in there. Whereas, the federal standard might be, you would follow up within, 90 days, and we were setting strict 30, 60, 90-day standards, which we want to do. But when you put that in policy, and if somebody is, followed up at 32 days, then that's a violation of your policy, right? So and we want to strive to be better, but I think putting it in policy is more of a guideline for staff and our incarcerated people to read and understand that, but our specifics can probably be put in our, in direction outside of that, so we don't get held into this standard that's so difficult to meet that we're going to fail audits, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, I get it. It looks bad to fail audits, right? And so you don't want to put in additional protections that would cause you to fail audits that you wouldn't otherwise fail if you were just following the federal standards. Having said that, it does feel like there's a way that we could have some sort of like two-tiered review system. And I appreciate that you all want to kind of keep the ball moving on this.
Well, and let me say a couple of things. So one of the things that we did is that we drew things out of policy and put them into attachments or into like, and some of those attachments are guidance, like there are checklists that people have to follow. Those attachments are not, don't create an audit standard, but they're really what facilities follow. Like if you have a watch commander checklist, the watch commander, if they have questions about what they're supposed to be doing, are not going back and pulling the PREA policy. they're going to pull the watch commander checklist off of the policy to make sure what steps are they supposed to follow when an assault happens, right? So what we're hoping, our hope is that by getting better clarity and resolving some of those issues that, right, through the attachment piece, one is it's easier for us to update those. It doesn't have to go through the same review process. So if we're right, we can, if there's more, it's more nimble and flexible to change an attachment than to change a policy. And it's also where the practical implementation happens off of those things like checklists and guidance that are attached to the policy. And really, that's where we're putting a lot more of the nuts and bolts procedures. So yes, retaliation monitoring must happen. And that is in the standards and it is in the policy. But exactly what are the steps for retaliation monitoring? That's the sort of thing that we put into the attachments, we place it into training. In that, if that makes some sense in terms of that's the approach we're taking. And the other thing is the policy is reviewed each year. And it's certainly our intention to continue with a list of things that people have suggested and say, does it make sense to put this into the policy or not on a yearly basis?
Okay, and I think we have a few questions, so let's pause and handle some of those. Madeline, you have your hand up, so you can go first, and then Angela has one in the chat that we'll address.
Thank you. And I can appreciate the system change in making the attachment or making an attachment to the policy so that it doesn't impact licensing standards, but still sets an expectation at a system level for behavior. What I would like to know is if staff then violate policy, certainly that would go in their employment file. It could result in discipline. What is the recourse for staff who then fail to comply with best practices in an attachment?
I mean, okay, I'm struggling a little bit to understand what, right? I mean, like, without a specific, I can't tell you, right? And I'm also struggling a little bit to understand, like, I want to address what you're asking, and I'm not sure I'm understanding correctly. I guess is where I'm at.
I might take
And I'll take a step back.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I was going to say I could try to take a stab at it too. I don't know if I fully understand, but I would say this is that we don't just hold people accountable for policy language. I mean, if it's an expectation that somebody opens up an attachment and follows those procedures, that would also be a performance issue that we would address. So it doesn't just fall under our policy, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I want to make sure that, I mean, what we are intending here is to impact how staff respond to individuals who report sexual assault. I think that's a lot of the contributions that we made to the PREA policy of what options are provided to inmates. And so if staff are non-compliant with the attachment, that's treated with the same rigor as a violation of policy would be.
Yeah, and I would add to that, one of the strategies we had going into this, and this is our first year for Liz and I in reviewing this policy, so it was a chore, believe me. But one of the things that we also wanted to look at is that the policy was so large, so complex prior that I think you open yourself up for people failing to meet those standards when it's so confusing and it's so big, so that was part of the strategy this year too, was just like to simplify things, shorten it up a little bit, but then really beef up on those attachments and those other pieces. That way it's just a lot more understandable, and I think you're gonna have less failure and then the piece that goes with it also is the training piece that Liz talked about, which is important.
And I guess the one thing I would say is that I would ask folks to look at the revised final draft. We took many of your comments, right? I mean, so it's not like we didn't take those comments. And I would ask folks if there are areas where you think you had made commentary that we either misunderstood or right in terms of how we implemented it into the policy, or that we did not take that should be in there, though that would be helpful. And it might also be useful to look at the policy and the attachments and see, even with both of these things in play, is there something else still missing? Right?
Okay, and to that
That would be
point,
helpful.
sorry, to that point, Liz, I think Angela's question was, are the attachments available with the new PREA policy? I assume that you guys would be able to send us the new.
Yeah.
Dawn can email us the new policy as well as the attachments. I assume that the attachments to the policies also go out to the facilities. Otherwise,
Right. That once it's finally approved.
Okay.
We're not, it hasn't been finally approved yet.
Okay.
So once it's finally approved, right? And I don't think you want us to send you all, I will, all of the attachments are listed, but the attachments include the PREA brochure in like 7 languages, right? We could send them all to you if you want them all, but I mean, I think we might hone it down to the attachments I think that you might, right? Like this, like, I mean, there's cross references to other established policies, right? So it cross references over to the behavioral health sexual harassment policy, right? So we could send you all of those, or like the policy links and the statute links. I'm assuming people can just go to the DOC website and get those policies. But the other checklist attachments and stuff, we can send those all out as well. Is that what you'd be looking for?
I think that makes sense. Maybe just send us all the things that you have in English, and then whatever, if you are linking to other documents that we can simply click to look at the hyperlink, then I don't think we need to also be sent the underlying documents. But if they're not available for us to look at by like clicking a link or something, it would be helpful to get them.
Yeah, I will make sure. I'm not sure if the draft hyperlinks work or if it's once it gets in there, but we'll figure that out and get that over there.
And then in terms of next steps for us, I think because none of us have had an opportunity to look at the new policy, it's hard to say, it's kind of hard to give, have a conversation about it.
Right.
So my thought is maybe we could have the subcommittee that made the policy recommendations from our group could look at the new draft and then have a conversation about whether, they're the ones with really the most familiarity with this, and then they can have a conversation about whether they agree, whether they don't agree, and then we could address it again at a different meeting. Crystal,
I mean, I think having some time to look at it makes some sense to see how we've incorporated things. Like with field services, there were some commentaries on that stuff. We also got feedback from the field services, so we totally redrafted the section. So there are pieces in here that were not redrafted necessarily based on the task force's comments, but have been redrafted. I think they address the task force's comments, right? So it's these were not the only commentary that we were incorporating into this final draft. So I think it would be helpful to have another look at that.
Well, and we have a few hands up again, so I'll go to that, but I just want to say too, if before we adjourn this meeting, Liz and Gino, if there were some of our comments that you did not understand or like didn't make sense, or like you just kind of have questions about why we made those recommendations, maybe we could address that before we close the loop on this.
Yeah,
today,
that would be helpful.
So that we're
Sure.
on the same page. But
Sure.
First, okay, Crystal, you had your hand up, and then Angela, you had your hand up. So Crystal, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, mine is just a process comment. I feel like Liz was starting to talk about overarching changes, and then we actually just kind of like went right to questions. So I wanted to see if there was more that Liz and Gino did want to share about the policy, and just maybe this is what we're getting to in the end anyways, which is like what changed, what didn't change, and the specific input from the task force. But I wanted to make sure there was still a chance to go back if there was more high level information that you two wanted to share.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things, but we can answer the questions first and then I'll just flag
Sure.
some of those things.
Yeah, that was my intent, is to just clear questions somewhat intermittently. Angela?
My question was similar. I'm also wondering, so just to clarify, the updated PREA policy has not yet been approved finally, is that? Okay,
Yeah, we presented it to the executive council and preliminarily approved it with changes to the field services part. So we just wrapped up the field services part. So now it goes back and then gets that final review. And then that'll be implemented to the DOC staff probably, I would guess, in January.
okay. And does that, and maybe you guys will speak to this, does that updated policy incorporate this new DOJ memo about aligning federal PREA standards with an executive order earlier this year? Okay.
Well, I could address that. No, it does not. The federal memo that came out around PREA standards has having no impact on our state policy or procedures. The only thing, and this was, I don't know if everybody knows, there was from the Department of Justice a memo that actually went to the federal auditors of PREA standards, basically saying that they should not be auditing on any of the standards specifically related to transgendered individuals, right? So the only impact that has on us in Minnesota is that we will not be audited on those things specific to transgendered individuals or be asked to turn in information specific. We in the state, our policy still includes transgendered individuals. The PREA standards themselves have not been changed, right? And we are still holding to those same standards, and they're in our policy, in our practice, in our procedure. And we will be keeping our own data on that. It just as our federal PREA auditor will not be asking those questions or asking for that specific data related to transgendered individuals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Crystal, you have a hand up still. Is that another question or you're okay? It looks like it's really hard to hear me. Nobody ever says that. Usually, so I don't know. I feel like I'm projecting pretty well in here. Am I not?
Yeah.
See that I'm blowing their ears out. I don't know what else to say. Can I sit closer to a microphone or is that...
I'm not exactly sure where the microphone
Okay.
is in this room.
The microphone is by wherever Don is sitting because we can hear him very clearly.
Do you want? I can sit over
If you want,
here.
if you
All
want
right,
to sit up
I'll
here,
move.
yeah.
Is it if I sit here? How about now? Can you guys hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
So were there other questions or did you want me to talk about a couple of the pieces in the policy?
I don't see any other questions, so I think we're ready.
So I think one of the places where Gino and I had a question, and this was a piece that you asked to add in at the very end of the policy related to victimized incarcerated persons who are known or expected to be pregnant, right? So part of, and I'm not quite sure, it would be helpful to understand what's specific to PREA is versus because medical, we have, and it may be partly not understanding where the policies that govern the medical folks within our facilities, what their obligations are, but I'm not quite clear and I don't understand what's the specific PREA related to pregnant women that would be above and beyond the directions that medical staff already are functioning under. So I don't know who added that in, or if it would be helpful to understand that better. That's one area where we weren't certain.
Angela's got her hand up and she's our resident expert in this area, so we'll let her take it.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. So when we met, we added that language in there just to acknowledge the fact that incarcerated people who are pregnant face higher burdens of pregnancy-related morbidity. And if it's not elsewhere in a policy, this seemed to be a good place to put it, because there can be a pregnancy as a result of rape. And so it was basically just to draw attention to those needs. It's very underreported nationally, and it was one of those areas in which we felt that we can do better as a state to be mindful of incarcerated people who are experiencing that and are at risk of that. I don't know if anyone else wants to add on to those statements, but that's my opinion. And when we discussed it, we just wanted it brought to the fore.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I appreciate having this group to be able to send that policy out and have that engagement, because I think that was really important for us. You know, it's typical that our policies go to several different entities within our organization, but not always do they go out to for public input or, you know, or specific input. So all of that information that we did get from this group was like super helpful. So, and I would also say this is that, you know, these policies come up, especially this one, it does come up on an annual basis, right? So we're going to continually try to improve these things. So any of that input that we get from this group was like super helpful. I really feel. And what we do is take that information that you provided, and we're going to look at that and see how that input might be handled in a different policy. Because one of our practices is we don't want to load up our policies with multiple, you know, if transporting a female incarcerated person who might be, you know, might be pregnant is handled in this policy over here, or a health services policy, you know, to Liz's point. That's those pieces that we want to make sure we're not necessarily doubling up on it. But I would encourage you to keep providing us that information when we send it out to this group, because it is helpful for us to see a different perspective, if that makes sense.
And the one thing that I will do, because it's helpful to kind of hear what the concern was or what you're trying to do with the language and the policy, because one of the things that Gino and I will do is we'll go back and look to make sure that the health services policies, because I think that's really where that should be addressed, and make sure it's there. Part of the reason we don't want to like put too much stuff that's really health service policy under PREA is that if you change policy one place and you've got it layered up, you've got to make sure you've got it changed consistently. So that's probably why we do a lot of referencing to other policies. And so this is helpful information for us to then go back and see, is this really something that should be changed under the health services policies? Or is there something, so that's why the question was, is it something specific to the PREA policy itself that we should be changing? And that was the question we were struggling a little bit with.
Sorry, thank you for clarifying. I'm just wondering, then would something like that be, and this might be, we can take this for another time, I don't mean to take up time, but would this be something that could be placed in an amendment within the PREA guidelines then, or does it need to go, you're saying, to maybe an entirely different policy, or maybe both?
Well, I think there's a couple of places where it should be looked at. First is like, what is medical policies, you know, procedures, to look there to see if these kind of concerns are addressed or not. And if they aren't, then part of it is to put it up to the person who owns that policy to say, this is input that we have as a PREA unit to your policy. And then whenever that policy comes up for the next revision, one of the things is that we get it and we get to have input, right? I mean, there's these internal loops that happen for this very reason about where should we be making sure that the health services policy correctly intersects with PREA concerns, right? So there's a couple of things like that. The other question is there something that we should be building into the attachment portions, right? Right. So, and I need to think a little bit about it. I took some notes about what you were saying. Right. So it might be, and it definitely is something that should be built into the training components, it seems to me. So that's it. It's not just a PREA policy question to me, but where are the other avenues that we should be building this consideration in or this information? So that's kind of a rambling answer, but I think we're going to do a number of things with that. And I think that one of the things what we will do when we send out the policy with the attachments is that we will pull clearly the policies that we think relate to where you've raised concerns and questions so that you can look at the companion policies.
Thank you.
The other thing that I'm going to flag, I mean, there are a number of changes that were made. There's just a couple things I want to flag because I know that there's going to be some ongoing questions and concerns about, and some it's just like, why did we do it the way we did it? You'll see that a number of things have been added in that were concerns and I think have been addressed. But just some places where I think a little clarity might help you understand. One was under like sexual abuse advocate. We struck the language that said that the program, the definition, I'll just read it. An individual who's completed the 40-hour sexual violence advocacy training and is employed by a community-based program. We've pulled it back to that, which is the statutory definition that is out there in Minnesota. It used to have an additional tag that says, and has been accepted into DOC's Victim Services PREA Advocacy Program. We struck that language, and we struck that language because that limits it. What we have under Victim Services is we have 20 some community-based sexual violence programs who are under MOU with us to provide community-based advocacy services and facilities. There are additional sexual violence programs out there who aren't necessarily the people that are under MOU with us, but who still are good sexual abuse advocacy programs who are connecting up through other means. And so we didn't want to say that we only mean those people who are under MOU with us, but as long as they're, have the 40-hour training and are employed by a community-based program, they meet the definition for this policy. Just things like that. So in some ways, it looks like we may be striking something, but we're actually expanding in some ways. So the other thing that I want to flag is specifically around false reporting, right? And I think this is a place where so there were some questions about what's in the standards, what's not in the standards. Why do we have this language on false reporting? And what I would say about this is that I think this is an area that needs a lot more discussion and a lot more work across our facilities. And we took a stance in this policy that really softened the language, and we've been working really hard with our facilities. I think there used to be must language around false reporting and some of the disciplinary approaches, and we've pulled it way back. We changed it to May, and we've been working with our facilities to say that discipline, discipline should not be a first line response to a false report, but that really let's look at what are the underlying issues going on, because we know that sometimes it's really tied to mental health issues, and maybe we need to have a behavioral health response here. That sometimes, that there are other responses rather than looking at discipline around a false report. And so that's the approach that we're taking right now. And this would be another area which we're going to continue to evaluate this to both how do we work with our facilities and also, so I just want to flag that because
I would comment on that too, with that, to Liz's point. I think even our current practices is not to discipline first. It's to really, these are looked at. We have, for example, several IPs who've got some mental health concerns that are kind of fixated on on, sexual behaviors and those kind of things. So they're reporting false allegations regularly, and they are not being disciplined on those types of things. It's understood that they have some behavioral issues, mental health issues, those kind of things, and we deal with them not through discipline. So I think adding that language of may is it just is simple word change. It makes it to where we have some understanding across the facilities that we look at these on a case by case basis, really. And there are some that are angry and make a false accusation at a staff because they're mad that they, had something happen. So we have to look at those both ways, really. So
in the bigger picture, this is also consistent with how we deal with discipline throughout our facilities in the involvement of behavioral health and looking at behaviors and in helping us determine what's an appropriate systems response to some concerning behavior. So this is consistent with the way we handle discipline. So this is really good.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add is it's one of the areas that we monitor, kind of looking at, how is discipline intersecting with the reporting and investigation stuff. And I would also note that whether or not anybody who raises an allegation of a PREA violation, whether it is substantiated, unsubstantiated, or unfounded, they are still offered community-based advocacy services, that it doesn't matter if it was an unfounded allegation or not, or even if it's found to be a outright false report, right? Advocacy services are still offered on an ongoing basis. So those are distinct. So I don't stop there.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, Crystal had a hand up and then Paula had a hand up. So Crystal, go for it.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I remember maybe it was 2 months ago when Liz and Gino were with this group last. This was an area of a lot of discussion. And it was an area of a lot of discussion in the executive council meeting as we also looked at the changes to this policy. And I think like a real shared commitment to this would really only come into play in the situation like what Gino just said, where it is like a conscious and willful misreporting, not something done, by a person that may be in crisis for other reasons. And so that, I think that's what I left our conversation feeling like we are all actually very aligned on that being what we want staff to understand and how we would want that to ever be enforced. It would not be meant to be punitive unless the spirit of the false report was punitive.
I guess to that, again, not having the policy in front of me, does the policy as written then say something like somebody who has intentionally and willfully made a false allegation may be subject to discipline?
That's the exact conversation we had, like with our general counsel too. Like, how can we phrase it that gets at that? And Liz and Gino, as I'm looking at the version that you sent yesterday, it looks like what we had talked about was the change became the may instead of the must. But I thought we had talked about inserting some of the language like what Corey just said.
We may have, and it may have got lost in the 72 versions that we had to create, unfortunately. And I think it's something that we could easily plug in there.
Okay, that's great. I'll work with you all too, because I know I'll see it again. So I will keep my eyes peeled for that, and we can talk to our legal team about the language.
Yeah, and I would just want to remind the group though, to Jeff's point, if we say maybe disciplined, the discipline policy process still has the due process elements in it, to where those people that are assigned to discipline really are looking at the facts, the mental health issues, those behavioral issues that pop up. And that's, so basically a false allegation, we hand it off to, if somebody is pursuing discipline still is that checks and balances on whether or not, we just can't automatically discipline somebody for that. So if that makes sense, we still have a really good discipline process out there at facilities where due process is really focused on.
Yeah, I mean, the other language that you could think about adding is something like intentionally and willfully reports false allegations with.
Can't hear you.
Intentionally and willfully reporting false allegations with malicious intent or something like that. But okay, Paula?
Well, so this is interesting. And Liz, I appreciate you saying that there's a lot of discussion around this and there'll be more discussion. I think that I'm worried about doing the language thing again, in that it's open to interpretation. Does one or two, and I appreciate, Gino, too, that you're saying there is a review process, but I think we had a lot of good discussion last time about, training matters, how knowledgeable people are with, am I mad? And then I accuse Angela that she's just saying that about me because she got pissed off I wouldn't give her her phone, her phone call. So I'm a little worried now that we're talking about adding really more language that should be up to interpretation and like the review process. And I appreciate checks and balances. And I also don't want to lose that piece about, are the people who are making decisions about this really knowledgeable about trauma response, all the stuff that we talked about last time, because there's nothing clear about trauma and trauma response and this kind of stuff. So it's not cut and dried. You can put all the different language in that you want, as you know, and it won't matter if if there's not more than one or two people making a decision, if they're not knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. And it goes back to the culture of the facility too, which I never want us to forget, because that has big impact on how people respond to people who are incarcerated. Thanks.
Yeah, and Paul, I would say, yeah, I mean, yeah, and this is why it's complicated. But one of the things that I think is important for us to look at is we know that we have hundreds, I think it's at least 100, if not more, of the allegations each year that are made that are unfounded, which means there was evidence to show it was not true, as versus unsubstantiated, which means we can't determine one way or the other, right? And out of those, I mean, that's why I think tracking very, very few of those actually ever even touch discipline, right? So I don't want us to create something in the PREA policy that makes people believe that what we should be doing with every unfounded allegation is flipping it into discipline, right? That's the opposite of what we want, right? So that's why I think it's important for us to look at the data and see what's really going on. And is there a problem with, and then I would ask, is there something in the policy that needs to be better explained, or we need cleaner language to get at what the problem is that is happening if we're having unfounded allegations that really shouldn't be landing in discipline, but really are trauma responses that need to be handled differently, right? So, I mean, that's probably why I think it's important for us to look at the data and see what's happening, and where, if there's a problem, then what's the right fix for that. So I do think we'll go back and look at the language and look at the various drafts to see about the language specifically on the false reporting information. But that's sort of my concern, and that would be my approach, is let's first look at the data and see where the problem is popping up. And if there is a problem, right?
So Liz, in terms of looking at the data, that would be pulling the number of complaints and then pulling, of those complaints, how many resulted in discipline and what the discipline was.
Right. So I would say looking at unfounded allegations, then looking how many of these resulted in discipline, and was the discipline specific to the report? Because oftentimes it's more complicated.
Right.
Well, and I think that would be helpful, and I think it would be helpful.
And
Liz is kind of freezing up there a little bit. But to her point, because I think she's froze up now. Yeah, we can take those cases that are unfounded. We can look at, how many of those were moved to a discipline status, and how many were not. So that gets us a baseline of just really how many. I don't think it is very many, but it would be good to have the data in front of us. And it usually has to be, pretty significant misrepresentation before it gets moved to discipline. But that's some data that we could present to the group.
Gino, I would agree. And I think that in addition to whether discipline was, initiated, what was the sanction or the consequence as well? And I think it would be important, for this group to understand what are the rates at Shakopee vis-a-vis other facilities across the state for men.
Sure.
Yeah, and can you hear? Am I coming in now? I just took my video off.
You are, and so I just want to follow up on this piece before we lose it. Gino, like how hard is it to pull this data? When could we expect to see it? How do we want to incorporate this into our continued conversations?
I think we can bring it to you probably next month.
Yeah.
Or at the next meeting, or email it out. We have to, basically we take our database and we'll just isolate do a search on the unfounded cases, and then we can separate those that are Shakopee versus male facilities or juvenile facilities. We should be able to break that down fairly simply.
Okay, would it be reasonable to get it to the task force or to Don to send to us a week prior to our next meeting so that we actually have a chance to look at it before the meeting?
Well, and I would just say that if we looking at February, I just want to be cognizant of our staff. We're going to be doing this work, and we've got some holiday stuff coming. And your January meeting might make it a little tight.
We are two staff down in our team also, so right now.
So we could certainly do it, hit the February mark a week before that meeting.
I think we already have some agenda items on the January meeting anyway, so we could just, let's make a plan to continue this conversation at the February meeting, and then we will have our subcommittee review the changes, and then we'll review the reported, sexual assaults prior to the February meeting. And then, so I'm not saying that we have to end this conversation now, but I just want to put a pin in that. Paula, you have your hand up.
Yeah, again, just a quick thing to add on the data, and then talking about internal review of data. So there's not just how many allegations have been made, unfounded, founded, whatever. It's also about internally looking at which staff are involved, looking for patterns. So which staff are involved, what shifts are involved, all of that. And I know you can't share that with us, but my hope is that would be a part of it as well.
We do track
internally.
We do track that. So our database has like several variable elements in it. Like, for example, where did this occur? What was there a staff involved? Who was that? Is there, so for example, and I'll give you kind of an example on the opposite end of it. We had a lot of really false allegations when we had a transgender staff working in Stillwater, where, the IPs really kind of didn't like that fact. So they were making a lot of false allegations about this person. So we were, we had to isolate that and really dig in and then try to increase our education to IPs and that. So it can happen on one end like that, or it can, we're looking at the other end too, is like, why is this person's name keep coming up? So those are tracked in that database.
Thanks.
Yep.
Were there any other things, Liz and Gino, that you wanted to ask us about or have a conversation about prior to our February meeting?
No, I think I would just have folks look through the policy and and attachments, and then come to that February meeting. We could then discuss if there are things where you think you have remaining questions about. That would be really helpful. And Gino and I will work together and get that stuff over to Don to get distributed as a package. So Don, I would say hold off. Don't necessarily send out the policy yet. We'll just do it as one full package.
And again, thanks for the engagement on the policy part. We appreciate that. And yeah.
Okay, well, it was nice to actually have the opportunity to be part of the conversation and like work collaboratively ahead of time instead of, casting stones at it on the backside. So we appreciate as a task force the opportunity to work together as well.
And we'll probably be sending it out again sometime next fall is kind of when that policy comes due. So, you'll get another opportunity to review it again later on, even this fall, and make edits and that. So we'll just kind of keep bringing it back to this group for the engagement.
Okay, and Paula, you have your hand up?
Yeah, it's not about Gino and Liz, but thank you both. It's about and maybe Don, you said something at the beginning, but Precious, I do not want to lose the lack of understanding around PREA for the juvenile world. And so I don't know what happened to, I know Don was going to try and get Precious for this meeting, but I'm hoping that we make sure we do not lose track of that and what's
I
happening.
can speak to that, Paula.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
I've been in touch with Precious several times, and unfortunately, she told me she was not going to be able to join this meeting or any in the near future. And I told her how disappointing I knew that would be to this group, given the interest and really wanting to be able to hear about the work that she does. So what I shared with, I think, Vicki and Corey over email is I feel like at least a next step could be if this group wants to come up with questions, I could help facilitate getting those questions to her and helpfully, like, I'm going to keep trying. But our efforts thus far, unfortunately, have not resulted in her being able to join this group.
Is she the only one at DHS that handles any of this or is knowledgeable? It seems like we might want to see if there's somebody else that we can bring in.
Paula,
That was my question.
one
What is
thing
her specific role?
I can't hear you, Corey.
What is her specific role and job title?
I can look up job title, but Mike, Christy, Gino, can you speak to like the work that she does from the juvenile
I just wanted to let Paula know that I haven't forgot about like the screening question. In fact, right now we're in the process of building in a brand new DOC wide database, which is going to take a couple of years, and it's kind of broken into different sections. But in the PREA section, we are working right now on developing the screening tool. And right now we've created the adult version, and now we are switching gears to the juvenile version. So I'm getting doing some research with not only our auditor, but other states to make sure that we have a screening tool that fits the needs for juveniles. So I just want you to know that I haven't forgot about what we talked about back in September, and that we have a good screening tool out there that can be kind of a model for at least, we'll use it in our facility, but maybe it can be a model for the other juvenile facilities in the state as well. So
maybe we could provide feedback as a group to that. And then I do want to hear from Crystal what she was going to, yeah.
Okay, hold on one second. What is Precious's last name? Lowry.
It's Lowery, Lowery, and her title is Compliance Coordinator in the Youth Services Office at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And then also it talks about her work related to juvenile justice and the Delinquency Prevention Act compliance monitor and Title II grant manager.
And I would say, I think Precious is the only one in
New
that
division.
role.
Sorry, yeah, that's a new division that they created, right?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe what we should do is put, just why don't we put juvenile PREA discussion on for our February meeting as well as like a continued topic? And then we can kind of brainstorm, if not her, then who? Paula, I know you and I have met with somebody else from that office before, and perhaps we can talk to that person about getting somebody in. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's concerning that she can't come to our meetings. Like, I mean, that's a big piece we need on how it actually is happening, because I still don't believe we have PREA for juveniles. And we don't have anybody that can come and say, oh yeah, we do, and here's what we do. And here's how it's tied to the child maltreatment issues within juvenile facilities. So I'm really actually kind of concerned about that. So whatever we can do, I'd appreciate that we don't let that drop off.
Yeah, let's keep it as an ongoing agenda item until we get it figured out one way or another. Crystal, you had your hand up still? Okay.
I just keep forgetting to put it down. I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right. So if nobody has any, I just want to be mindful of the time. Our other guests here, it's 11:12 right now, so we have about 45 more minutes of the meeting. I think we have our ongoing items just to close the loop on this topic. We are going to meet with Gino and Liz again at the February meeting. At that meeting, or a week prior to that meeting, we should also have the data that is related to sexual assault complaints and false allegations broken down by facility in terms of Shakopee vis-a-vis the rest of the state. And then we would also have that broken down by of the false allegations are unsubstantiated or unfounded. It would probably be good to know what are unfounded, what are unsubstantiated, what are substantiated, and then the results of those categories. And then in terms of the updated draft of the policy, I don't think we should wait to hand that out. That I think we should get out right away to our subcommittee so that our subcommittee can like really kind of dig into it. And then we will also discuss that in February. Does that sound good to everyone? Yes. Okay, perfect. Well then moving on, we will turn the floor over to our other guests at the meeting. We have Liz, no, we don't have Liz. We have Christy and Mike. Yep. So Christy Strang and Mike Garland here, and I will let them give us updates. Do you want to sit here? Sure. You want me to talk all this time? Oops, sorry.
So I'm not sure really I have any sort of updates per se related to PREA. Paula, one thing I will say.
They can't hear you. You have to yell like me.
Can everybody else hear me?
You're kind of soft spoken.
So one thing I would like to just say is that from a 2960 perspective, which is the rule that governs the juvenile facilities.
They can't hear you. What if you sat there?
I feel like I'm screaming.
Yeah, I know. We need to get you like a little lavalier.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, the key's nodding,
okay.
Yes.
So from a 2960 perspective, which is the rule that governs the juvenile facilities, although there's nothing PREA related in 2960, I think there are specific things in 2960 that we look at to ensure that there's protections for kiddos. So like screenings, staff training, reporting requirements related to sexual misconduct or client-to-client sexual conduct. So these things aren't going kind of unnoticed. And if we don't have jurisdiction to look into, we're referring to the appropriate jurisdictions. Sorry.
Did
Is
you
there a
guys get that?
microphone in the room that could be used?
Or could she join by Zoom and then talk into her computer?
We're gonna get feedback. If we have that mic and another mic and the speakers, we'll get feedback.
I don't understand why we can hear Don so clearly when he speaks. That does not make sense to me.
I
And it
don't
sounds
know.
like actually some people, Madeline says she's okay. I don't, so yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I knew better how to help.
Let me go and see if
Can
I
I
can find it.
provide like a written update to the group?
She said that she suggested she could provide a written. Can you guys hear me?
When you talk up loud, I think it's a WebEx problem, maybe?
Yeah. So she suggested that she could provide a written summary of what she would say. Would that suffice for all of you? Or let me ask you guys this. Do you have specific questions right now for them? This was a bad spot.
It's so bizarre. I feel
She
like
was going to say.
I'm scream talking, that's why.
What I had shared with Mike and Christy was just this group's general interest in like wanting to ensure that there is understanding of what happens with PREA for juveniles, and then what are also the things that are happening through their team's work around licensing and inspection of juvenile facilities. So that's sort of what I shared with them, that I know this group is always looking for more information about.
And so again, I would just reiterate that we don't necessarily wear the PREA hat, but the rule that governs 2960 facilities, there are things within the rule that require, you know, appropriate screenings, appropriate reportings, and every inspection we're reviewing for those standards.
So would it be fair to say that 2960 basically just requires you all to make sure that the juvenile facilities are following whatever written policies they currently have?
Yep.
And that's what you're reviewing them for?
Yep.
And how often are you guys going into the juvenile facilities again?
I mean, for an inspection, we are doing every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
But that doesn't mean we're not looking at complaints. We're out much more frequently, looking into incidents, complaints, special incidents. DHS also has a role in looking at maltreatment.
So, and Paula put PREA is not incorporated into 2960.
It's not.
So then how would you guys kind of be looking at PREA-ish compliance outside of 2960?
We aren't. That's why
Okay,
I said I don't wear the PREA hat.
So if it's not in 20, okay, so nobody's doing PREA compliance? Is that the real answer?
In juvenile world?
Yeah.
I guess I would defer to Gino or Liz.
Gino, Liz?
I would say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I know, well, Red Wing is our, facility, falls under our facilities there. They are PREA compliant. They have a PREA audit done every 3 years, just like any other facility. So they do follow the PREA standards. From our meeting in September, I believe, I can't remember the person's name, but she works at Anoka. They are a facility that chooses to be PREA compliant and get audited. Not that they're choosing to be compliant, but they're choosing to be certified compliant. So therefore, they're hiring an auditor. They came in. I don't know what the standard is for other facilities, if it's whether that's a federal requirement. I mean, it's a federal law, but the compliance is typically let me put it, the accountability comes with, it's monetary for facilities rather than, a facility or an auditor isn't gonna just randomly come in and be able to shut a facility down. The compliance it's based on whether or not, somebody's gonna get federal dollars for that. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. So we have a few hands up. Let me make sure, if I understand correctly, nobody from the DOC is monitoring PREA compliance at Juneau facilities housing girls, because girls are not housed at Red Wing.
That's correct.
Okay. So then the question, but they can do it on their own if they want to, set their own.
No, that is not accurate.
Okay.
I think that's
all right,
really
Crystal,
like,
take the floor.
it is
I
required
probably
that juvenile
misspoke on-
facilities comply with PREA.
Okay.
Right. They
It
have
is
to
that
comply, but
DOC
we
does
do
not oversee
monitor
them.
Nobody audits their compliance.
Right, yes. That,
We
Crystal,
do
thank you
not.
for that.
Okay.
But what I would say is that we don't know which facilities are going through audits or not. Every facility is required to follow the PREA standards.
Yeah.
DOC is required also to certify compliance in all of our facilities, which includes Red Wing Juvenile Male Facility, right? We do not oversee that same level of certification of compliance anyplace else. Some of the, I believe, like some of the larger counties are doing that, but there's no directive about the certification of that compliance. We don't know which ones are not, and it's not a published report any place that I know of.
And there's no way for the PREA compliance auditors to just, the licensing inspections division to make PREA compliance part of their licensing procedure for juvenile facilities?
I think it's possible. I think the rule would need to specifically refer to federal law.
So you feel like, I'm going to summarize here. I believe what Christy is saying is that she believes that there would need to be a rule change in order to allow the DOC to inspect for PREA compliance as part of licensing. And Christy,
Because that is outside of our scope. So I think this is what we keep falling into, right? It's like, it is the county or whoever the oversight entity is to ensure that the facility is compliant with the federal standards. It is DOC I&E's responsibility to make sure they're in compliance with the state rules. And this goes back to Paula. I know why, like, we are trying to connect these dots in a way that is more coherent. And I feel like we keep talking in the same circle, which I know is frustrating for everyone.
is there, and I guess my question is there anything, do the state rules are they not the same level of protection as PREA currently? So we would need to amend the state rules generally.
I think if everybody can hear me okay, I just want to direct everyone's attention back to what Christy started with, is that Rule 2960, for example, has numerous mentions and protections about sexual safety, rules regarding reporting and investigation of sexual activity in the facilities. The rule speaks to that in great detail. And so those standards are part of the licensing review. But it is correct, like the deputy commissioner said, that the PREA Act and standards is not specifically addressed in the rule. But there are many elements of the rule that are intended to provide safety in a 2960 licensed facility.
So I guess to me the question is, what further protections does PREA have that 2960 doesn't have that we would want to see? And I assume none of us have like looked side by side at, well, maybe you guys all have, but I have not looked at PREA side by side with 2960 to see like what it specifically is lacking. Paula, have you?
So when Gino and Liz were here a couple months ago, they outlined all the wonderful changes they're going to make, the things that are currently in process to help people who are who are victims either by staff or other people in the facilities. None of that is part of 2960. So I do think that there needs to be a rule change and there needs to be a coordination between PREA and the monitoring and the things that are required in PREA for adults. I do think that needs to be in place for juveniles, and there needs to be some kind of coordination. I do understand that 2960 deals with 2960, and unless there's a rule change, there won't be anything else. And I do think PREA needs to be part of 2960, and there needs to be the same things that are offered in PREA for adult prisons needs to be for all juvenile facilities. And I do want to remind us again, DOC does license all the other facilities. So in my mind, they have responsibility for PREA, but they really don't because it's not part of 2960. So I think there does need to be a rule change. And I think that's something that we can make a recommendation of. And we've talked about that in the past, to coordinate it and bring it in and make sure it's solid, like in juvenile, all juvenile facilities that are licensed by DOC, just like it is in adult prisons. So
Okay, so Angela
I
has
think it
her
would
hand.
take a rule change, and I think we need to recommend that.
Okay. I think if we want to go down that road, I think we need to look at the PREA policy and we need to look at 2960 and see where the gaps are so that we could specifically point out what parts of the rule would need to be changed. So we can create a little subcommittee to do that if we'd like to. But Angela, you had your hand up as well.
Sorry, thank you. I'm just wondering what, and I believe we discussed this a couple of months ago, but is there ever a situation where juveniles are housed in adult facilities, like Shakopee, for example? In which case, the 2960 rule and PREA will come into potential conflict. Maybe that isn't an issue.
That it is, if a juvenile girl is certified as an adult, I believe she would go to Shakopee, but I believe that then she would be, if she's housed in Shakopee, PREA then would apply anyways. So
it would.
Yeah.
And the standards for example, we audited Lino Lakes this past year, and they have the youth unit in there. So when we audit Lino Lakes for PREA, the standards for that particular unit that houses the youth there's additional standards for that particular unit. So that would be the same for Shakopee.
Oh, thank you.
And to be clear, we don't have a unit at Shakopee similar to Lino does. In my time at Shakopee, which started in 2015, we've had one juvenile female at our facility, and there were specific standards based upon PREA that we had to comply with for this single individual who has since aged out, and she's part of our general population now.
Thank you.
okay, does anyone was there other information, Mike or Christy, that you wanted to present to us, or does anyone else have questions for Mike or Christy while they're here? I guess
I do, Corey.
Yeah, all right, great. Nikki has a question.
Christy, I remember when you came to speak with us the first time, we had spent a lot of time talking about this lack of clarity around whether DOC can de-license facilities, juvenile facilities. And you said at that time you all were seeking some legislative change that I don't believe passed. So I'm wondering if is there a legislative update you can share with us about what the DOC might be attempting in 2026 in this area?
Yep, Nikki, and I can actually share the bill with you that is being proposed to introduce that again, so that we would have the ability to not necessarily de-license, but it gives us additional things under our tool belt to take action against facilities. So rather than just turning a facility on and off, there are additional steps that we're proposing that be taken. So like
I think that would be, that's great to hear, and I think all of us would be interested in seeing that. If you could share it with Dawn. Thank you.
Okay, Paula has her hand up.
So I'm curious, Christy, why you wouldn't want the authority to be able to close a facility if it was that egregious, like Masabi Academy is a really good example.
we do have the ability to close a facility, Paula. Currently, statute only allows us basically to turn on or turn off a facility. And what we're proposing is that we be able to issue corrections orders or conditional licenses, similar to what we can currently do in adult facilities.
But you can't pull a license? Maybe I misheard you earlier because it's still really hard to hear you.
Yep, we can pull a license if we need to.
Okay.
So I don't know if this helps, but what I'm hearing being said is that what we're lacking, or what DOC inspections is lacking, is intermediate steps. So it's either on or off. It's either yes or no. But what we're lacking is okay, take corrective action. We'll come back and review kind of stuff. What we're lacking is those middle responses. I don't know, Christy, if that is accurate or not.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so in the chat, Paula suggested that in addition to the task force taking a look at PREA alongside 2960, DOC should do this as well. Has that been done? Is that being done? Do we know?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my knowledge. But I think it's something that, our unit, the PREA unit, can work with, licensing and inspections to kind of, maybe we could sit down and review 2960 and review our PREA standards and see. To Mike's point, I think there's a lot of correlation between 2960 and the PREA standards, a lot of safety features that are in there. But to Paula's point, there probably is something that are missing. So, yeah, I mean, I would be willing to have our unit work with the inspection unit to just kind of determine where the gaps might be.
That would be great, Gino. Thank you.
Remind me also who from our task force was on the subcommittee that looked at the PREA policies. Nikki, Angela, Paula, were you? No?
You asked who was on it, Corey?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't hear oh, Tana. Was it just the three of you? Would somebody just put in the chat who was part of that subcommittee? I know.
And Maya. Maya?
Okay.
I think it was 4 of us.
Angela, Nikki, Tana, and Maya. Okay.
Yes.
So we got 3 out of 4 of you here. Do you feel like it would be too heavy of a lift as you kind of look at this again to also look at PREA?
That's.
You mean 2960?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was like, that's what we were doing. I don't think so, because we were looking at PREA, and then with the national standards, we were kind of already doing some of that. So.
Yeah, and 2960 isn't actually that long, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
But I don't want to tap, you guys really did a great job of taking on a lot of heavy lifting. And so I don't necessarily want to tap you all with doing more. But also if it's the easiest way to kind of look at these things side by side, because you're all very familiar with it right now, it seems like that would be a good thing to just kind of scan.
Corey, I would appreciate if so a lot of us in that group are also now on the conference subcommittee and we're moving on stuff. So I would appreciate if Gino's, team could tackle that for, like providing us with an overview versus needing to tackle that ourselves.
I think our unit can certainly do that, and then, and then it might be the first step, and then if there are different questions from the subcommittee, but we can certainly provide that to the task force, and the subcommittee can look at that first.
Okay. Nikki, your hand is up. Is that just still up from before? It's done. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Okay, so it sounds like the DOC is going to also take a look at whether there's anything missing from 2960 that is included in PREA. And then I guess I would just say if any individual task force members feel strongly about this, that would be a good thing for us to familiarize ourselves with prior to the February meeting. Angela.
Yeah, just so I understand correctly. So for the subcommittee to go over the new but not yet approved PREA policy, we're going to do that for the February meeting. Is that correct? And then we may or may not get to the 2960, or DOC is going to do that.
Yeah, and actually, I just had an idea. We could use AI to help us with this and just run both policies through ChatGPT and say, tell us where compliance is lacking, and just I will do that. I think my husband has a pro account for his law firm that I can just like snag and borrow. It's public information anyways. I'll just do that today or tomorrow and send it around, and maybe it'll be accurate, maybe it won't. There's my caveat to all of you, but it might be a decent starting point.
Could you send that, make sure that gets sent to me then too?
I'll get it to our Don here.
All right,
I
perfect.
think that he'll disseminate accordingly. But I mean, it's pretty amazing at how it can synthesize information. We just need to be diligent about checking it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a really good baseline for us to be able to start out with.
And we could do it with just the free ChatGPT, but the pro version gives better outcomes.
I have a quick follow-up question, and I was late to the meeting, but Angela is kind of answering it, I think. The recommendations that we sent over for when we did the PREA little subcommittee, those are being sent back to us to review. Am I hearing that correctly? The changes that were accepted or not?
I think they're going to send you their current version.
The current version? Cool.
And then you'd be able to see what changes have been incorporated or not.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. It is 11:40. Does anyone have anything else for the licensing folks that are joining us? Okay, well, thank you both for being here. And then I think the next thing on our agenda is to get some specific updates from Shakopee. So Jeff is here. We were curious about updates on body searches and scanners and transgender support counseling at Shakopee.
So I wasn't here for the last meeting. I had a staff retiring, and so I had a little conflict and couldn't be here. So I don't know the specific questions that you have. But I can give you numbers updates on the body scanner and talk a little bit about where I believe that we're using it, using this technology in other facilities. If you have other questions, just please let me know, and all of that. So we continue to keep track of the number of scans that we do and the reasons why that we do them. So over the past year, I think we started this in like 2023, or we started keeping track of numbers in 2023. But over the past year, we're averaging about 1,433 scans per month at Shakopee alone. These scans are from a number of things, from visiting. Every new admission coming in gets a scan. When somebody leaves the facility for a delegation or a writ or something like that, they're going to court. And when they come back, they get scanned. Some forms of discipline and for suspicion and that kind of stuff get scanned. So 1,433 a month. So in the last year, we've done over 17,000 scans. The 90% of those are related to visiting, and about 7.5% new admissions. Every other one just kind of fills in those other categories that I have. Crystal, if you can, if I get some of this wrong, you may have better information than I do about where else we have scanners. So I know we have one at Stillwater, and we're using that at Stillwater. I believe we have them also at Moose Lake, Rush, Faribault. I'm not sure about how they're using it, but I know that we have wide policies. So if they're using the scanner, they're needing to follow the policy, as is Shakopee. And then the only other update I have on that is I believe St. Cloud is maybe pursuing looking at one. I don't think they have one just yet. And I think that's, with budgets the way they are, it might be a little ways down the road before they get one, if they don't already. So those are who I think that has them system wide. Anybody have any other questions about that? Not being part of the conversation last month, I don't know specifically what questions you had. And hearing none, I'll move on to the next thing.
One.
The next question.
I guess
Okay.
I think the question would be, what if any are the situations in which the scanners are not being used or offered?
Scanners are not used primarily. They're not used when it becomes it becomes impractical to use it. So the impracticality portion of that tends to be around disciplinary issues where somebody's behavior is unpredictable, and we need to have we need to not have them right at that equipment at that time. And so it's generally around those things. There are some situations where we are concerned about maybe the type of contraband that they're trying to conceal isn't being able to be picked up on a scanner. Sometimes someone's body weight and their body type can impact that as well. But those are very rare. And so I can tell you definitively that with 1,700 plus scans or 17,000 plus scans that we've done this past year, those are unclothed body searches that haven't happened because we've used this technology over that. But basically, it has to do with the safety of the individual, the integrity of the equipment, safety of staff, and all of those things, where we would defer to an unclothed body search. When someone goes to segregation or someone's behavior is in that is in kind of that realm, a body scanner would not be used in that. So we would do the unclothed body search before somebody goes up to segregation. That's a lot of them.
So Jeff, there was a question in the chat from Paula. How many body searches are being done per month?
About 14 over the past year. 1,433 is what we've averaged per month.
body searches, not scan
Oh,
searches.
body searches. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I don't know that information. I don't know that we keep track of that specific information.
I think Commissioner Schnell said a long time ago that that would be tracked as well, because it doesn't do us any good to say, not have that comparison and then know, like you said, anecdotally, the different reasons why a body search would be done. It would be good to know how many body searches are done and for how many in each of those categories that you need. Otherwise, it's hard to assess progress, wouldn't you say?
Okay. Sure. I will follow up and see if I can get some of that information, see what we track and what we don't. All I know is I do know that the information that I have that where I grab my information, that information is not part of this. So I'll check around and see what I can dig up for you there on the unclothed body searches.
Jeff, do you think it would be reasonable to have that information by the next meeting?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. So let's add this as an ongoing agenda item for the January meeting, just to see an update on the total number of searches at Shakopee. Of that, how many are like with the scanner, and then how many are body searches? And any other like disaggregated data that you think would be helpful.
Do you want to have the policy go along with that? Because I think part of it is what are the different purposes, right? And what is supposed to happen when we're doing a scan versus an unclothed body search? Do you want that to be part of the conversation?
Do you all want the policy, or do you just want to know the numbers before digging into the policy?
I mean, both would be helpful, but definitely the comparison data between body searches and, you know, the use of the scan. And then I thought Commissioner Snell, this was a while ago, said that would all be used data analysis to determine, you know, be able to assess if it's being used when it should be and when body searches shouldn't be used. So I am curious what happened with all of that.
We can look into that, Paula.
Okay, anything else on the body search issue? Hearing nothing?
Me. Yeah, I would just love to hear in January your own kind of it's been a few years now, right? That Shakopee's had. It's been like 3 years, right? Of data, or two and a half. Like, curious about if your team has thoughts about whether Shakopee is safer or less safe, whether you've seen less contraband coming in, more. I mean, these things can't be directly related, right? Or we can't like directly prove like if there's more contraband in Shakopee that like the body scanners aren't catching it or something. I'm not trying to make that argument, but I would just love to just kind of hear how your team feels about levels of contraband in Shakopee, safety in Shakopee. If you feel like you can make any kind of calls at this point about how things are going in relation to the body scale. Like, I don't know, like lessons learned, or like what's the kind of macro story here about?
Yeah, just anecdotally, and I'll get more in depth in this when I do that, when I ask about this, but anecdotally, I mean, things that are internal to a body, and maybe somebody swallows something, or say they swallowed something, that's something we wouldn't be able to see before. And so for safety reasons or for safety benefits, this anecdotally has helped. I'm aware of times that this has helped us, but I will ask the question and get a more complete answer on that.
And how the women feel about, I mean, that's a significant, if 1,400 scans are being done a month that all would have been unclothed body searches, like that is a significant number. So if you have a sense from the women, if there has been any change in
they are very
how the women
appreciative.
feel or the morale.
they're very appreciative of this. I just a number of months ago, I just did an ad hoc walk around and asked about what do you think about this as we're moving toward not doing these. They're very, very appreciative of it. I mean, in terms of the intrusiveness and the response to, someone's personal trauma and how that feels to be in that position versus, going through a body scan. It's a welcome addition from their perspective.
Great. Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. And then the other one had to do with transgender support around the recent protests.
Well, I think, Jeff, can I just
the facility,
frame it quick? Yes, the protest kind of gave us kind of put it on our radar, but yes, around the protest specifically, but also in general, what does support look like right now?
Sure. The sense, I don't have a date on this. It's been 2 years. It's got to be 2 years or a year and a half. Now, in general, we have offered an outside person has come in and done every other week has done a transgender support group, and that group has had, I think, consistently is 6 to 10 folks in that transgender support group. So that happens. That's in general what happens. There is ongoing, access to behavioral health and gender identity committee issues, or gender identity committee that people bring issues to and find support and access to resources through. Those processes are general. In terms of response specifically to the protests, we as a facility did not offer anything above those as responses to specifically to the protests that have been there. What we have done is we've moved the protests, or we've staged the protests out of view of general population. So if you've been to Shakopee, you know that we have 3 basic parking lots. One parking lot has some view of the facility, and the facility people can see where that's happening. The protests largely are directly in front of the building, probably, and the one that I watched a couple weeks ago was specifically on the specifically near the sign out front. It has either limited or no direct really view of where they were. So so we do limit them and the protests to not go into that other area, which makes them more visible. But in terms of responses and support for specifically our transgender folks, to that, we've not offered anything.
And Vicki had asked who leads the group that you were talking about.
Yes, the person's name is Ori Wasserberg, and I'm not sure what organization Ori is with, but their Gmail is just a personal Gmail, so it is. So I'm not sure that they're specifically with an organization.
And are they offered, so is there trans specific or LGBTQIA specific therapy services offered on site as part of mental health services?
Specific to that, I'm gonna say I'm about 80% sure that no, we don't offer specifically that specialized mental health service. And I say that only because I'm not sure who in our system would do that. We do have I'll get to you, Angela, in just a second here. We do have I'm aware of a therapist who takes a lead in some of these around some of these issues, but in terms of offering a specific, say, therapy group or therapy sessions around this, I'm not really sure. And Angela, the process to get involved in an individual therapy is same as everybody else in the facility. They are assigned a primary therapist when they come in, and that's their contact while they're there. That changes occasionally in terms of, you know, staffing and population changes on those. If they're interested in getting and being involved in the transgender support group, they would write to our behavioral health director, who would put them on the list to get them to the group.
Angela, you have your hand up. Do you have more follow-up?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jeff. So is that the process for outside individuals to come in as well?
For just to maybe start a new group or to be involved
Yeah.
in this group? No,
Yeah,
that's
just any group.
Oh, any group? No, that would be a little bit different. It depends on the type of service that they're asking. If there are some things that happen in our facilities that are more program oriented, and so if they're curriculum based, that kind of stuff, you know, to walk people through, that has a different process. But if somebody wants to offer a support group, that generally comes to me, and then I connect them with the right resource within the facility to make sure that to get that arranged. So they would go through volunteer training. They would do do the background checks and all of that as well.
So the individual who is leading the support group at Shakopee currently went through a process like that?
Correct.
Okay.
I guess while I'm thinking about like what about culturally specific therapy and groups? Are there culturally specific therapy providers on staff or as part of given access?
Yeah, so yes, I'm not sure how deep you want to get into the culturally specific um, providers on staff, but we do have fairly diverse staff at Shakopee. I wouldn't call it at a representative level, but we do have a number of staff um, who are connected in those ways. We don't offer any specific um, culturally relevant or culturally focused programs through our behavioral health. And one of the things that we are working on is around our Native population, because 25% of the women there um, are Native women, and so we are working at bringing in some cultural programming for those folks to be able to do that. We're probably halfway there, getting that organized. And I anticipate something will be offered probably beginning in the spring. Our Wendy Spry, who is our uh, liaison with the indigenous populations, is involved in setting that up along with myself and a couple other people at the facility.
That's good to hear. Is it, and I don't know how you would do this, but question, is there an effort to to assign people to therapists that are from their same culture when possible?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And if I said something for sure, it would probably be wrong. And I'd have to correct myself.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I think we're like a minute to time. Okay. Does anyone have any other additions to any of our upcoming agendas? For our next meeting, the plan is to have Christy Cobbs come in and talk to us about the girls report in Ramsey County. Do we have something else on for next month that I'm missing? I feel like we were talking about something via email, but I don't know that
We were gonna talk,
membership.
yeah, task force attendance and membership review.
Yeah, we'll talk about task force membership and attendance at the next meeting as well. And then for February, we will tackle our ongoing PRIA conversation. And we'll hopefully have some insight into somebody from the Department of Human Services that could talk to us about their role as well, but we'll keep working that problem. And then I guess what I will do is just leave it to the subcommittee who's currently working on the PRIA policy to, could you reach out to me if you see things that you want to bring to the table during our conversation in February? When you kind of look at what was accepted from our changes and what wasn't.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. Anyone
Thank
else
you.
have anything else that they want to add to either agenda? All right, well, we got a lot done today. Thank you everyone for showing up, and we'll see you all in a month.